Good morning, afternoon, evening. We have people from all over the world, which is terrific. So pick whichever is right for you, and it's very much my pleasure to be here at Resilience Week. I'm Stephen Wolff, and this is my colleague Audrey Wyatt. Today, we're going to help you understand how to achieve agility by creating a shared reality. And I discovered the importance of shared reality through my work with leadership teams and organizations around the world. And I've had the privilege of being able to see deeply into the workings of those teams. And what I discovered is that there's a lot of needless suffering and ineffectiveness in teams. And why is that? Well, as we're going to see today, a big part of the reason boils down to the team's inability to create a shared reality. So, what is a shared reality? You may have seen this metaphor. It's the blind man and the elephant. Everyone sees their piece of the puzzle. It's a snake, it's a fan, it's a rope. But the fact is, no one has the truth. Reality in this case, the fact that there is an elephant in their way, can only be known if everyone shares his or her perspective. And the elephant is really a metaphor for some challenge that your team faces. A team with a shared reality is what I call in sync. They are pulling together in the same direction. And it is essential for effective teamwork, and it is essential for adaptability and resilience and agility. So I want to show you a short video of a crew team that's in sync. And your team may not be a crew team. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. But I can tell you, when you create a shared reality and everyone is pulling in the same direction, it feels very similar. So let's take a quick look at this.
When you have 9 girls in a boat completely together and in sync, it is a feeling like no other.
When everyone's moving together, when everyone's pulling hard, you can feel the boat lift out of the water. It's like you're flying. And you can just hear bubbles rushing underneath the boat. It's the sound of the water moving against the boat. And that's when you know everyone is moving perfectly together.
Okay, so that is a team in sync. Now, let's take a look at what happens when the team is not in sync, when the team does not create a shared reality. Minor misalignments can cause drastic problems for the team. So I hope you can see that being in sync, or for our purposes, creating a shared reality, can make a really huge difference in the outcomes for your team. So because it's so critical to your team's success, I'm going to look more deeply at the concept of shared reality, and then Audrey will help you with some practical ideas for creating it. There are 5 areas where your team needs to create a shared reality to avoid being the crew team that tipped over or ran into the dock. And the first 2 areas require intentional agreement. You have to sit together as a team and talk about these and agree. So the first area is goals and priorities. Your team needs to agree on where you're going and what your priorities are. The second is shared values and roles. And this is knowing and agreeing on how you will work together. Now, if you don't create these agreements, your team will not be pulling in the same direction. You will be like one of those out of sync crew teams. And one of my biggest aha moments was when I figured out that well-intentioned people wind up in needless pain because they don't know how to create a shared reality. A lack of shared reality is, as I said, a major source of problems in a team, like conflict, dysfunctional team members, ineffectiveness, and a lot of emotional suffering experienced by members of the team. And I'll tell you from my experience, it doesn't have to be that way. So let's go back to our domains of shared reality, because these provide a way out. The remaining areas require people to voluntarily share information that's in their heads. But when team members are not pulling in the same direction, when there's no clear agreement in the first two areas, it creates mistrust. And people won't feel safe to voluntarily share. It feels more risky. The intentional agreements form a foundation for the next three voluntary sharing agreements. If those aren't in place, these are much more difficult. So the first area, which is voluntary, is that people have to share their beliefs and mental models. This helps the team see the same big picture. And going back to the metaphor of the blind man and the elephant, as a team, you have to share your beliefs, mental models of the situation. In other words, your piece of the elephant, so that collectively you can come to understand that the problem isn't elephants. The second area is that people have to voluntarily share their ideas and perceptions. So once you understand the problem, you have to solve it. And this is about sharing your thinking so the team can generate innovative solutions. And finally, the third area, and perhaps the most difficult, is sharing your stories. And very briefly, what these are the assessments and judgments that you make about a situation. And the amazing thing is, there's research that shows the time between sensing a problem and sharing it with the team is directly proportional to performance. The shorter the time, the better the performance. So because it's so important, and I've just given you a brief sense of these, I want to help you understand shared reality more deeply by looking at two powerful examples. One where it made all the difference, and one where its absence led to tragedy. So the first example is Apollo 13. And when an oxygen tank exploded 200,000 miles from Earth, the team pulled together, shared what they knew, and solved the problem. Their ability to create a shared reality brought the astronaut home safely. The Challenger disaster, on the other hand, demonstrates what happens when shared reality is missing. The mission, unfortunately, ended in disaster. So let's see how these two cases created or didn't create a shared reality. So at the start of the mission, both teams had similar goals. Apollo 13 wanted a successful lunar landing, and Challenger wanted a successful launch and to deploy a tracking and data relay satellite. And then an unexpected challenge happened that required adaptability, agility, and resilience. So in the case of Apollo 13, the oxygen tank exploded, and the hole you see on the side of the service module on the left is not supposed to be there. And the Challenger experienced much colder than expected temperatures at launch, and you can see the icicles hanging from the spacecraft on the right. So let's look at how these two teams created a shared reality, or not. So for Apollo 13, a new goal immediately became clear. Bring the astronauts home safely. Everyone was on the same page. In contrast, the Challenger team struggled with alignment. Engineers focused on safety, while leaders were under pressure to stick to the launch schedule due to political and commercial concerns. And as far as priorities, safety was Apollo 13's top priority, which fueled their adaptability and resilience. And with everyone being aligned, they avoided conflicting agendas and worked swiftly and effectively to solve the problem. While the Challenger team, they also valued safety, but it took a back seat to the launch schedule. And as a result, it created dangerous trade-offs. Their priorities were simply not aligned. So now let's talk about values and roles. The Apollo 13 was anchored by shared values of safety, innovation, and teamwork. In the Challenger's case, the value of safety was overshadowed by external pressures. And importantly, dissenting voices were undervalued. Engineers raised concerns about the safety of the O-rings in the cold weather, but those concerns were not heard so that the mission could stay on schedule. And as far as roles, Apollo 13 had very clear roles. Engineers tackled technical problems, astronauts provided real-time feedback, and mission control coordinated everything. And this clarity allowed them to work in sync under immense pressure. The Challenger team, however, lacked this shared understanding. Engineers assumed leaders would act on their warnings, while leaders expected engineers to push harder if their concern was critical. And these misaligned expectations led to bad decisions and a failure to adapt. So think about your team. Has your team created a shared reality by agreeing on goals, by agreeing on priorities, but not just agreeing on priorities, but are they used as criteria for decision making? That is how you know they're more than just hollow words. Have you agreed on values? And again, not just agreed on them, but hold each other accountable for them. They're not just words on a piece of paper. And finally, have you agreed on roles? Does everybody understand and are they clear about their role, especially in a crisis? So now let's look at the voluntary aspects of creating a shared reality. Both teams needed to build a shared reality about what the problem was, and they needed to find a solution. So for Apollo 13, Their clear goals, priorities, values, and roles created the foundation that allowed them to quickly understand the situation and generate solutions. They figured out they were facing an elephant very quickly. And one of the challenges was creating a carbon dioxide filter for the lunar lander, which was built for 2 people, but now was going to be a lifeboat for 3. The team's shared values of teamwork and innovation, along with clear roles, helped them quickly develop a shared understanding of the spacecraft's state. And mind you, neither the astronauts nor mission control could actually see that hole in the service module at that time. They only saw that after it was jettisoned. The alignment was key to their adaptability and ability to problem solve under pressure. For the Challenger, conflicting beliefs about the O-rings created hesitation and poor decisions. And you see a graph on the right showing data on O-ring performance at different temperatures. And the engineers at Morton Thiokol, who are in charge of the O-rings, saw in this data a high risk of failure in the cold. But the NASA decision makers had a different mental model. They saw acceptable levels of risk. And they couldn't get aligned on this. And the lack of alignment in their mental models ultimately led to tragedy. So again, thinking about your team, does your team create a shared reality on how you see the world, your piece of the elephant? Do you share your ideas and solutions to challenges, or do you defer to leaders or experts? Do you truly encourage dissenting opinions? And do you deeply listen to those dissenting opinions? Do you see possibility in adversity and develop innovative solutions? So now let's move on to the final domain, the stories that are created. And remember, stories are the assessments and judgments that you create about a situation. The Apollo 13 team avoided falling into destructive stories. Instead, they built an empowering story. We're capable and we can solve this. And the fact that they chose to assess the situation in this manner kept their morale and resilience strong during the crisis. They avoided creating stories that would have a negative effect on their ability to be resilient. For example, like blaming each other or assuming failure was inevitable. And so they were able to work as a team and they were in sync. In contrast, the Challenger team was weighed down by unspoken stories. Leadership assumed engineers were being overly cautious. This was their story. While the engineers assumed leadership prioritized schedule over safety. This was their story. None of these were ever shared and spoken. And these stories were not shared, and so they eroded trust, and they eroded the ability of the team to collaborate effectively. The engineers also had a story in their heads that if they were too forceful expressing their concerns, it might hurt their career. And this story, along with the erosion of trust created by their assessments of each other, made them hesitate to be emphatic about their concerns. And so they were unable to create a shared reality. They were a team that was out of sync. And it was impossible to effectively assess the problem. And to use our metaphor, they couldn't figure out they were facing an elephant. Everyone was sticking with their perception. And as a result, they were unable to adapt to the cold weather challenge. So again, thinking about your team, has your team created a shared reality by sharing your stories? Do you openly share what you're sensing and feeling, even if it feels uncomfortable? Do you share your assessments and judgments in a skillful way? And we'll talk more about that. It's not just dumping. You have to be skillful in order for your sharing to actually be heard. So to sum it up, these two teams are a powerful example of the impact of a shared reality. Apollo 13 showed extraordinary adaptability. They shifted to a new mission objective on the fly. They had extraordinary agility. They were quickly able to create and implement improvised solutions to the problems. And they had extraordinary resilience. They persevered through what seemed like impossible odds. In contrast, the lack of a shared reality on Challenger unfortunately led to disaster. So the moral of the story, if your team is out of sync and has not created a shared reality, it will lead to disaster. Perhaps not as drastic as the Challenger. Perhaps it's simply that your boat tips over or runs into a dock, but it won't be performing. Your team won't be performing at the highest level. So let's summarize by looking at the outcomes when a team is able to create a shared reality. There are team outcomes. You build psychological safety and trust in your team. There's authentic communication. You're adaptable. Members are engaged and there's accountability. These lead to team outcomes, performance outcomes for the team. The team is agile and resilient. It innovates. It creates breakthroughs. There's faster decision making and accelerated execution. So now let's look at what happens when a team doesn't create a shared reality. And for the team, there's fear and mistrust and disengagement. There's a lack of accountability. You might see things like scapegoating and people blaming each other. And one of the things that often happens as a result of not having a shared reality is conflict and dysfunctional members. And there tends to be some degree of emotional suffering. People are frustrated, angry, etc. And these team outcomes lead to performance outcomes. There's a lack of agility and resilience. The team isn't able to respond quickly to challenges. The team gets stuck in a rut and lacks innovation. Decisions are ineffective and slow. And the team is inefficient. So the Apollo 13 and Challenger examples show us the real world effect of a team's ability to create a shared reality or not. And whether it's space missions, product launches, or simply unexpected crises, a shared reality isn't just a nice to have, it's the foundation for agility, resilience, and adaptability. But here's the thing. Creating a shared reality is really tough. It takes intention, effort, and skill. And so let me walk you through a few reasons why it's so hard. And then I'll turn it over to Audrey, who will share some ideas to help you create a shared reality in your team. So the first reason is the team has not created a solid foundation by intentionally agreeing to goals, priorities, values, and roles. And without a starting point that's clear, it's like building a house without a blueprint. Misalignment at the foundation creates cracks that widen under pressure. And for reasons I'm not completely sure of, teams tend not to do this simple step that they can do intentionally. The second reason is fear of creating conflict or damaging the team. And many people, out of good intentions, shy away from tough conversations because they don't want to create tension. But not sharing often prolongs the agony and makes things worse, and it becomes harder to address challenges and issues that show up later. Third is that even if you share, it can be hard for people to understand each other. Miscommunication is inevitable. We're human. Even with the best of intentions, people bring their own filters and perspectives and backgrounds, which makes it hard to truly connect. And Audrey will talk a little bit more about this. Fourth is not being in a helpful and supportive mindset. So when stress or defensiveness takes over, it's almost impossible to collaborate effectively. Your mindset can either foster connection or deepen divides. And often when there's a problem, you are experiencing that emotional distress. It's hard to be in a helpful, supportive mind. It can take a while and you have to get there. Fifth is not knowing how to express your sense productively. As I've said, sharing needs to be done skillfully. And sometimes people don't know how to share their thoughts or concerns in a way that others can hear. And finally, it's an investment of time. Creating a shared reality doesn't happen overnight. It requires a commitment to slow down, align, and really listen, which can feel like a luxury in the face of looming deadlines. But I can assure you that your choice is either invest the time now, or you will pay much more later. As the saying goes, pay me now or pay me later. So now I'm going to turn it over to Audrey to give you some practical ideas to help you start to create a shared reality.
You might want to stop share, Steve. Okay. Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, everyone. My name is Audrey Wyatt, and I am Steve's colleague. And I want to pick up where Steve left off. Many teams struggle with creating a shared reality. Before the pandemic, I facilitated courses for a very large tech company who aimed to have a speak up culture. But I noticed that while I was tasked to help employees do that, very few felt comfortable sharing their reality. So when I met Steve back in 2020, I was pondering why, in this open environment, everyone was so hesitant to share their reality. So, how is your team doing in creating a shared reality? Are you in sync or out of sync? Steve just shared two extremes. Are you more like Apollo 13 or Challenger? Everything that Steve and I do is about helping to build a team's culture. To build an unstoppable culture, your team will need to do something counterintuitive, and that is slow down. Steve just mentioned that. And work on building a shared reality that will help you get unstuck and achieve agility. So, let me give you a few practical ways to get started. First, your team will have to explicitly commit to creating a shared reality. Commitment will help you, especially when it gets tough. Steve and I practice what we preach. We work very closely together, and yet we are so very, very different. There are times when his reality and my reality seem so far apart that I just want to throw in the towel and just give up. However, we have made a commitment to create a shared reality. We keep at it until we merge realities and something even better emerges. I want to show you this from my vantage point as a team culture coach and facilitator. So let's say we observed that the team had missed a major deadline, and that happens all the time. This is only the tip of the iceberg. And from this vantage point, all a team can do is react by blaming or complaining or sulking or firefighting or whatever, but there is still no shared reality as to why. Now, if we look just beneath the surface, team members have been having minimal discussion. We've observed that their meetings are very short and they're rushing through everything. And at that level, a team might begin to see their patterns and anticipate them, but still not really create a shared reality. So let's look a little deeper. If we take that time and go a little bit deeper beneath the surface, we see that there is an unwritten agreement. Just keep moving no matter what. Don't slow down to address issues. Now, this is a level we can help. We can help redesign practices and agreements. And then at the deepest level, the value at play might be swiftness over depth, where there's a tendency to prioritize swiftness and discourage deeper exploration of differing viewpoints. Now, this value is strong and yet unseen, even from the team. And at this level, this is the level where you can transform these shared values so that you can get the outcomes that you want. And by the way, this is the iceberg systems thinking model. And this is a model that you might want to use. If you're having unfortunate events on the surface, you might want to just start looking deeper. Now, values are the DNA of your culture. Therefore, you must commit to embracing new shared values. Now, this again is easier said than done. The goal is to make creating a shared reality a part of your team's culture. Now, we're not asking that you replace your current values. We are asking you to add those that help the team operate at its fullest capacity. Now, these deeper forces, the values, they help produce a shared reality. And that shared reality, it's really hidden oftentimes. And so those shared values help build the shared reality. Let me say one more thing about shared values. Values represent a leverage point in your team's culture where, as systems theorist Donella Meadows has said, a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. So let's look at which values a team might want to embrace to create a shared reality where a small shift in adding these values could create really big effects. So, what values do you need to transform to have a shared reality? Well, teams could start by focusing on the values of curiosity and candor. Now, curiosity is not necessarily easy for many of us. We are hired to solve problems, and oftentimes we're experts, so we overlook other viewpoints. However, by showing genuine interest in other people's viewpoints, we show empathy and strengthen relationships, creating a safe and inclusive environment where everyone feels valued. Curiosity also enhances understanding. By driving team members to ask questions, seek diverse perspectives, and explore underlying assumptions, leading to a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of shared goals and challenges. Curiosity takes time, though. Suspending those quick judgments and decisions requires asking questions and seeking answers. Now, this can take time in the short run, but prevents unnecessary mistakes and misunderstandings in the long run. Again, we're not asking you to replace a value. At some point, though, it might become necessary to reprioritize a value if it competes with another value and hinders the team from building a shared reality. For instance, if your team values swiftness, there may come a time when it competes with curiosity, and the team makes a conscious choice of which value will get them the outcome they want. Next, let's look at the value of candor. Candor helps build trust. And when team members trust each other, they share their thoughts, their feelings, their vulnerabilities, aspirations, ideas, concerns, without fear of judgment or retaliation. And when team members value candor, it promotes openness and honesty, ensuring that all team members have access to the same information. Now, let's just say if you as a team member withhold information for whatever reason, well, it can blow up later in the form of conflict, misunderstandings, and miscommunications. Candor helps to align everyone's understanding and expectations, reducing misunderstandings and miscommunications. Finally, when team members value candor, they're better able to hold each other accountable to the agreements they have made. But let me say something on a personal note. Sometimes we feel that with candor, you either have to be honest, and what I mean by that is brutally honest to the point that you don't care about others, or you feel like you have to be kind, so kind that you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or hurt the team. But the truth of the matter is, the two are not mutually exclusive. You can be honest and be kind. How you say what you say matters. And this leads to cadenced conversation, which is when your team has that focused dialogue at regular intervals. And when you're having this dialogue, be sure to ask if anyone is holding back and determine whether you have all the information from different perspectives. Be sure to be conscious of introverted team members and invite them into the dialogue, being careful to learn to listen before you speak. Now, make working on creating a shared reality part of the work you do and not something separate. Take the time to integrate it into your retrospectives. Now, the result of shared reality is what Crucial Conversations calls the pool of shared meaning. And I absolutely love this concept. Imagine a team where everyone is skilled at dialogue and where each team member does their very best to make it safe for everyone to add their meaning to the pool, even if you don't agree with their ideas. So, what goes into this pool of shared meaning? Some people think that when you're on a team, you only just give me the facts. But that's not reality, is it? Of course, we share facts, but we also learn to share our thoughts and feelings and stories, experiences, concerns. Now, as the pool of shared meaning grows, it helps the team in a number of ways. First, it helps to build relationships. Next, the team is exposed to better information so they can make better choices or decisions. They can also build off of each other, eventually coming up with alternatives that no one had originally thought of, but that all wholeheartedly support. And finally, when the team has more accurate and relevant collective information, they can move more quickly. So here are just a few focused conversations you might consider with your team. How committed is our team to creating a shared reality? And if you find that the commitment is rather low, why don't you just go back and review this information again to see just how important it is? How should the value of curiosity show up in this team? Every team is different, so you can talk about how you want the value to show up. Are team members free to share their thoughts and feelings and vulnerabilities and aspirations? And how will we hold each other accountable? So these are just a few starter questions. So to become that unstoppable culture, take the time to slow down and begin creating a shared reality. Let's sum it up into 4 C's: commitment, curiosity, candor, and cadenced conversations. Steve created the Inspired Teams framework, and it helps teams focus at the deepest level so they can change patterns of behavior that lead to sustained culture change. Now, there are more values levers and skill levers that teams can customize to help create a culture of energy, innovation, execution, and transparency. So head on over to the Comparative Agility website and take the Inspired Teams assessment and use it in your conversations to create a shared reality. Now, as we said, we know that creating that shared reality is difficult. Now, if you need help, feel free to contact Steve and me. We would love to learn more about your team. And now, are there any questions?